Hello, this is Jim Darling, and this is Meeting with the Mayor. And today we're very fortunate to have Representative Oscar Longoria with us. Oscar, congratulations on being on our show, first time.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate the invite.
It's exciting to have you. You're real active in the legislature, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but a little about your history. You're actually was born outside the city limits of any city in
Yes,
the county.
actually, I was born in Mission, Texas, born and raised in Precinct 3 in the county portion. Attended La Jolla ISD, elementary, middle school, and high school. Graduated in class of 2000. Stayed home for a year. Went to South Texas Community College at the time. Transferred over to the University of Texas at Austin. I graduated in '03 with a degree in corporate communications. Came back home for about a year, and then I went back to UT and got my law degree. And been practicing law since 2007 down here in South Texas.
So how is it, we talk about no annexation now in the county versus city. How was it growing up in an unincorporated area? Was it any different?
I think at the time, a lot of the cities in western Hidalgo County were very small, and they were still growing, so they had just made the transition from kind of a county to a municipality. So probably at that point in time, I really couldn't see the difference, but I think now with the growth and the growth of those cities, La Jolla, Peñitas, and Sullivan, you kind of see and appreciate, what city life has to offer. I mean, you see it here in the city of McAllen all the time. I think a lot of these services that the governmental entity offers the citizens sometimes may be taken for granted, or the citizens don't know because they've never been afforded those services.
I was a city attorney for like Rio Grande City and La Jolla, and I incorporated Peñitas. They were such nice people, they couldn't afford to pay me, so they had a barbecue for me, raffle. And so I got paid that way. It was very nice of them to do that.
Was it a good barbecue?
It was a good great barbecue, yeah. But they were really starting as an unincorporated area, and I guess when you get a certain mass, the county doesn't provide street lights and some county services, and so that's why we have 22 cities in the county. I think in this last legislative session, when they said cities can't annex, that's going to be a huge mistake. And we don't grow in areas where we have homeowner associations of a couple hundred acres of a development with security and pools and all kinds of different things. We grow in 10, 20 acres, one road subdivisions, and the county really doesn't have either legislative authority, building permit, zoning, or even the financial ability to provide the services that a city does. And that's why people incorporate. So I don't know what's going to happen now where people are going to be non-annexation in areas. In fact, is the growth going to be enough where they're going to then request annexation and cities got to then catch up with services?
I think it's something you really have to look at. I think sometimes folks move to the county with the intent to kind of be under the county, and they don't want to live within a municipality. But of course, the way everything grows in population, they want to be afforded nice streets, they want to have lights, they want to have, police officers patrol those roadways. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. So it's a case-by-case basis. You don't want the cities just kind of growing maybe more than what they can handle just to encroach on the homeowners, but at the same time, it's just part of the natural process of the city's growth. I mean, it's just going to happen. It's hard to kind of keep a city bottled up, and you kind of see it all over the place. You look at Edinburgh growing north, you even look at the cities in western Hidalgo County, growing into areas that when I was a child were just desolate fields, and now, there are tons of subdivisions and tons of growth, and I'm sure a lot of those citizens within those areas are looking forward to, getting annexed by cities such as La Jolla, Peñitas, and Sullivan to get some of the benefits that the city has to offer.
Yeah, we're at Monte Cristo all the way. We go from the river to Monte Cristo. It's 22 miles. But, just in the growth pattern is important to make sure that we did that. We've annexed a lot of areas that were in the county that we've spent an awful lot of money catching up with roads and drainage and those kind of things. And that's, we're really trying to prevent that from happening. There's still a lot of catch up to do.
I guess in a perfect world, you'd have a city that needs to grow, and you have citizens that want the growth, but you got to make sure that the city is going to be able to offer the services that they need to offer to make sure that the citizens that are getting annexed are going to get the adequate services that a city has to offer.
Yeah, I think they ought to teach home ownership in high school, because a lot of people don't know, a developer does a cul-de-sac street, and it's got septic tanks and borrow ditches for drainage, and unless you went out there when it's raining, you wouldn't realize some of the problems it causes and that. And it's very, to tell people, they say, well, why'd you move there? And say, I didn't know. It was a nice day, it was nice subdivision. It looked like a nice subdivision.
I think it's part of the growth of South Texas, especially down here in the Rio Grande Valley. I mean, we were a rural area at one point in time, and now we're kind of busy metropolitan, and if you look at, you know, cities like Mission, McAllen, Pharr, kind of together in the aggregate, I mean, it's competing with areas like DFW. I mean, in the city of Houston.
Yeah.
I mean, Hidalgo County, you know, we'll see what the census numbers come out, but I anticipate it'll be well over 1 million. And, you know, I tell folks that, and they're astonished that hadn't been to the area in a while or have never been here. And when they do come, they're like, no, you do have that population. I mean, little endeavors. Just on a Sunday, I picked up a buddy of mine at the airport, and we drove down to North 107, and we were stuck in traffic on a Sunday afternoon, and he was just astonished. Hadn't been down to South Texas in a good while, and he said, this is a Sunday, and he just could not imagine how many people were on the roadways.
You get some of the benefits of growth, but there's also some corresponding problems.
The growing
to that kind of
pains.
growth. The growing pains, absolutely.
Yes.
I heard that the new commissioner to the TxDOT, Mr. New, he talked about TxDOT is always catching up, and so there's no plans for the future. And so by the time they catch up, it's time to catch up again.
Yes.
And widen the roads. And he said it's just they haven't been able to take a breath really and say, okay, here's projects that we're going to start now that maybe we'll need in 10 or 15 years. We're going to start them now.
Yep.
Instead of waiting. And they just said we just don't have the time to do that.
I guess it's all about having that future vision where everything's growing.
And we don't have an interstate. When you really look at it from the rest of the country, our interstate system's not very suitable for all the kind of growth we had in the commerce that we have. From that standpoint, pretty interesting problem. I guess a good problem to have.
It's good.
And,
Growth's always good.
You know, I grew up in upstate New York, and they wish they had growth problems.
Well, I just got back from New York about a week ago, and it's a little bit too overpopulous, and it's difficult to get around. So hopefully we don't get to that point anytime soon.
A little bigger than Mission.
Yes.
La Jolla there. Now, your district, like you said, runs through all kinds of different parts of the county, and 2 counties, actually.
Yes, Mayor. You know, I have the privilege of being multi-county, so I represent Hidalgo and Cameron County. In a nutshell, my district's Western Hidalgo, west of Mission, you know, Peñitas, a little bit of Palmview, La Jolla, Sullivan City. I abut the Hidalgo Star Line, North McAllen, north of Lark, Commissioner Zamora's district, you know, North Ware, North Westico, north of 1015, Indian Hills, Mercedes area, the Delta, Ed Couch, La Villa, Monte Alto, La Feria in Cameron, Santa Rosa, and of course, let's say about 3/4 part of Harlingen as well.
How do you campaign and remember what city you're in?
You know, I'm in the valley, is what I like to say, right? I'm in the valley. It's one of those things. So I try not to bog myself with every city, but every city has their own particular needs and issues. So I kind of look at more regional approaches on what I do. But we have 3 offices. We have one in Peñitas, one in Ed Couch, and one in La Feria.
Wow. That's a lot of different constituents and a lot of similar problems in there, but also, gee, a lot of different constituents. It's
a lot of constituents. You know, City of McAllen's needs are very different from a city like Peñitas or La Jolla, very different from Ed Couch, very different from La Feria, Santa Rosa, and Harlingen. So every city, you know, has their own benefits, and at the same time, they have issues that they're dealing with and trying to work through. So I try to help all of them with what I can.
With our population growth, are we expecting with the new census a couple more representatives, do you think?
I think that's always a possibility, you know, depending on what the numbers come out. So it's very important that folks go out there and make sure they fill out their census the way it should be filled out. I think, you know, I advocate to everybody. Those numbers have great value for the area, not only, you know, for representation, but in turn the representation will allow for more allocation of funds both on a state and federal level. So it's important that folks take that really serious, and we don't want to leave any dollars on the table that we're entitled to.
And we have over 300,000 people that still live in the rural areas, in the rural environments from outside city limits. And it's so difficult. You know, I'm on the 911 committee, and a lot of them don't have addresses because they were started as a colonial, so their name's Alma, usually a woman's name that was the patriarch of the matriarch of the family, and so there's no address. And so how do you do a census like that? And in those areas, they say, well, you know, you can go online. Well, they don't have access to online. So it's going to be really a challenge, I think.
Yeah, we're in a unique area, but we got to make sure that we spread the word and that folks get educated about the census and that folks that are executing the census do what they need to do to make sure we get an accurate reading.
I tell everybody, tell your friends, your employees, your employers, everybody, just keep reminding them about that and how important it's going to be to us.
It's very important.
It's especially in the rural areas where they do need the help with drainage and some of those other things. Now, you've been in public service for a while. You were actually on the school, well, I think first appointed.
Back in '07 when I came back and started practicing law, I was appointed by Commissioner Joe Flores to serve on the Iowa Special Utility District. Now, during the time they were going through a transition, and it was part of receivership, so I was appointed and put on that board. Now, part of the agreement was we couldn't seek to run, and we drew straws on everybody's respective terms. My term was short, so it was a 2-year cycle. So once that was done, I stepped down from the utility district, and there was a special election for South Texas College, right? Formerly South Texas Community College. I ran for that. I got elected. At the time, I was very proud because I was the only board member that I had actually attended the institution. So
right.
yeah, so I enjoyed that. Served on the board for South Texas College, and I didn't seek re-election for the board. And it just so happened that there was going to be lines redrawn because of redistricting. Court orders had ordered this district created in South Texas, which is House District 35, which is the district that I now represent. And I filed at the very end. I ran against somebody from Cameron County, and I'm here.
And the rest is history. That was 2003. No,
yeah, that was 2000.
13.
Yes,
13.
Yeah.
So
and my first term in the legislature was in 13, and I've been there ever since.
We almost crossed paths. I used to represent La Jolla Water Supply Corporation for
Yes.
years. It became Iowa. And then I was South Texas College's first lawyer for 10 or 12 years, right before you came on.
So I was always a step behind you.
I was a step behind me across. Yeah,
Yes.
that's interesting. And you've really done well. I mean, 13's, I mean, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, your 4th term, 5th term.
Yes, yeah.
And you're already, I'm a vice chair of appropriations, which is a pretty important
You know, I was really lucky. I got there in 13. At the time, we had Speaker Joe Strauss was the House Speaker, and he appointed me on appropriations. And at the time, I was the only freshman Democrat that had been appointed on that committee for some time. Served there, and at the time we had Chairman Jim Pitts. Next cycle, 15, Chairman Pitts leaves, Chairman John Otto takes over, and I think I may have served as a vice chairman capacity on one of the subcommittees, and go into 17. John Otto retires from the legislature. Chairman John Zerwas takes over, and I become the vice chairman. And then just recently, this past session, under Speaker Bonner's leadership, Chairman John Zerwas served as chair, and I continue to serve as vice chairman.
Now, why is that important to be vice chairman of appropriations?
You know, I tell everybody there's one bill that needs to pass every session, and that's the budget. And, you know, we alternate. You know, it's depending on the year, it will be House Bill 1 or Senate Bill 1. Each respective chamber files their respective budget bill, but there's just so much to the budget process. And it's kind of ironic because I went to law school because I didn't like to work with numbers, but somehow I ended up working with numbers, right?
Some big numbers.
Yes, yes. So, you know, in a nutshell, I like to explain to everybody the way the committee works. So I also have the privilege of serving on the legislative budget board. I was appointed by Speaker Strauss, and Speaker Bonnen kept me on there. So what happens is we'll start meeting, for instance, the next session, legislative session, will be January of 2021. So we'll start meeting sometime probably in August, right? We'll start meeting and we'll work on what they call the base bill. So some of the legislative budget board members will meet with some of the folks that encompass LBB from the Senate side, and we start working on what they call the base bill, all right? And we'll look at prior bills, and right now what they're starting is what they call legislative appropriation requests, LAR. So agencies will go before the LBB and before the folks that work at the appropriations and Senate Finance and tell them what their needs are and what they need to get done to continue to execute the services that they do. So we'll work on a base bill, and now we'll have that bill, and it'll probably be ready sometime, you know, early January, and then the bill's filed. Now, once the bill's filed, there'll be a House bill and a Senate bill. Kind of similar, but sometimes, you know, they're very different in details, which is very important. So each respective chamber will file the bills. Each respective chamber has their committees. Senate Finance, and we have the luxury of having Senator Chuy Hinojosa serve as vice chairman of Senate Finance. And then, you know, House Appropriations will follow their bill. So then they break down the bill into usually subcommittees, right? Because it's just real voluminous, and we want to get into the details and see what we do. We work through both bills for several months, and probably about, I would say, March, either right before Easter, like right after, we'll actually hear the bills on the Senate on the House floor. Now, both bills are heard. They're changed and modified, and then they're both voted out of each chambers. Now, since both bills are going to be completely different, they'll go into what they call conference, right? So now we're going to get the conferees. So conferees are named, and I've been lucky to be the conferee.
And they really have conference committees.
This one does have a conference committee, okay? So what will happen is there'll be House conferees and Senate conferees. Now, I've been lucky. I've served with the Comfrey past 2 legislative sessions. So what we'll do is we'll go and we work through the details and through the differences. Everything we agree on, we really don't touch, but stuff that we don't agree on, we have to hash out. What do we put in? What do we put out? What numbers are going to be modified? Why is the Senate trying to do this? Why are we trying to do that? Justify, and we just try to get a happy medium. Eventually, when we get that done, we vote out the conference committee report, and then that's the final budget that's sent over to the governor's office.
Sounds like you're pretty busy in the session just with that role.
It is, and I tell folks, there's so many folks, we can only do so much, but the folks that work in Senate Finance and House Appropriations, the committee clerks do so much. Legislative Budget Board is immense value. They kind of run all the runs and look at the numbers, and they'll tell us, if you do this, this is what's going to be the positive ramifications, these will be the negative ramifications. So there's just so many individuals, our budget folks that are in charge within the House, the budget folks in charge in the Senate, and then you have the governor's component there as well. And there's just a lot of individuals that work on that year-round because it's really important.
Like education, healthcare, there's about 4 things that take up.
Well, a big portion of the budget goes into healthcare, and a big portion of the budget goes into education. I mean, they're big budget drivers, and it's just natural because of the cost. As population grows, those continue to rise and rise and rise, and the cost of healthcare and the cost of educating folks is very expensive. So, of course, there are always big budget drivers. We've been very lucky. The state of Texas has been in a good financial spot for many years. We have our downswings, but thankfully, the way we kind of run it, we've been able to kind of weather any storm. And I tell everybody, it's not a bottomless pit of money. We kind of work on a fixed income, we really do, and we just need to make sure that we take care of all the needs, and if there's a little bit of excess, we'll address some of the wants, but we have to make sure we address all the needs.
And in Texas, unlike the federal government, I mean, you have to go into debt for certain things, capital costs and those kind of things, but almost all of our debt is by constitutional amendment elections.
Yes.
And very few, it's always a balanced budget. And the only exception to that, it would be on things that the voters approve. And even those, the money's set aside and it's predicted that it's payable.
We're very careful on the way we spend state funds. Sometimes there's disagreements on where to allocate those funds, but in all honesty, we try to just address what we can. And I tell everybody, folks come to me all the time with great ideas and really positive things we should do. But I tell folks, look, whenever we're going to try as budgeteers and try to apportion money for something, we like the one-time cost approach because, we know that if we fund this now and if we're in a tight budget cycle in 2 years, it's still going to be accomplishing the objective that we try to accomplish. Because if for us to go and get into something and incur expenses and then for folks to come back in 2 years and say, if we don't get this money, all these services will be lost, these people will lose their jobs, it puts us in a very difficult predicament.
Yeah, I was kind of critical of the 3.5% cap on cities. Primarily, 100% of our ad valorem taxes in McAllen goes for police and fire and plus. And so when voters vote, we had several parks and things voted on in the last couple of years. Well, it takes maintenance of those, and the voters already approved them, and now we're scrambling to figure out how we're going to do that with the caps in place. And we'll live, but we're fortunate to have other things. The county's the one that really I think I'm worried about because they don't have sales tax, they don't have some of the auxiliary examples of raising money that cities do. And I talked to the judge and I said, and with no annexation now, when we used to annex property in the county got the benefit of the increase in valuation based on the development, but it had no obligation because the city took on the streetlights, roads, drainage, and everything. And now the county's going to get that benefit, but they're going to have the tax, they're going to have the obligation to provide those services. And so I think, balancing budgets in cities are going to be more difficult than they have in the past because of that. And hopefully the legislature will re-examine that and not make a hard and fast rule.
We usually do that, Mayor. A lot of times we'll pass an idea that we think is very good, and we'll have to tweak that idea or either renege it altogether. Yeah. But usually we'll look at something. Right now we're looking at bills that were passed this past legislative session and seeing what the repercussions will be, because sometimes you may make a change and you don't see every negative effect down the road. I mean, you can't fathom it. So it's important to go back, and that's why they'll look at it in the interim and say, hey, well, multiple times in the beginning of session, a lot of the bills that come up across saying, we passed this bill, we need to correct this. So,
or for instance, our voters voted in collective bargaining in our city, so we have that coming up. And I told the firefighter and police officers, better go to Austin because there's no money. But I mean, when the voters did that, that's not anything the city fathers decided upon, but it's an obligation that the city has to take seriously, and all those things. One thing though I noticed with how integrated the world economy is, and with China having the virus, I saw gas prices were $1.68 a gallon.
They're a big consumer of that, and it can affect us negatively. The majority of our revenue, a lot of it comes from sales tax.
Yeah.
So it's always good. Folks are out there shopping, shows that the economy is bustling. That's always positive. But we do get a lot of money through oil and gas, severance tax. And of course, whenever that's not doing so hot, it's going to negatively affect us. So we're kind of always a little bit behind when we get those numbers. But the comptroller's office is always looking at it. Sometimes I tell folks, so if something really happens real big today, we may not feel the repercussions for it until a couple months. So it's not real time. A lot of estimations, but definitely over a long period of time, if those numbers are down, it's not going to help us out.
No, but it does. We've been very fortunate with oil and gas.
Yes.
In trade. I looked at from a trade standpoint. In Mexico, I think USMCA is going to have a huge impact in Texas for the betterment of industry and those kind of things. So hopefully that'll happen.
Yeah, we're a fossil fuel state, and we get a lot of revenue because of it. So it's something important to continue to look at.
Yeah, except for electric cars.
No, electric cars, they're always good.
Electric cars are good.
Yes.
Still need to have power to.
Happy medium.
It's a happy medium. Now you're in calendars. That's
Yes.
People understand calendars. Well, that's pretty easy. June and July. So why don't you explain a little bit about calendars?
So the way calendars works is whenever anybody wants to pass a bill, you file a bill, and so you'll file the bill. You'll be heard in committee if you can get a committee hearing, and then you want to get it voted out of whatever respective committee. Once it's voted out of that respective committee, you want to get it on the House floor, and then that's when calendars comes into play. We had Chair For Price. He was the chairman of calendars, and I was one of the calendars members. So what happens is members will come to us, and they usually have to work every single committee member to try to get it onto the calendar. Yeah, it's a lot of
stuck in calendars. That's an expression.
It's a lot of magic that happens with that committee. Yes, but so being on calendars, if there's a bill that you're not so affectionate for, sometimes you can slow down the process, and at the same time, if you see a bill that you really like, you can help expedite the process. So it's one of those interesting committees.
Yeah, we ought to have that at city level.
Yes, yeah, and we meet at all hours of the day and all hours of the night. It's one of those committees where they'll have, we'll be on the House floor till midnight, and then we have a calendars meeting at 12:30.
It gets real hectic as the session goes along.
At the very end, because we're trying to get everything on there and accommodate to all the members.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yes, yeah.
So you're in two pretty powerful committees.
Yes.
Then. Pretty fortunate. You're the guy to go see.
Yeah, appropriations keeps me bogged down, and calendars, keeps me bogged down as well. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's obviously you've done well with the leadership and joining the leadership with those positions.
Yes.
So we're lucky to have you.
I'm glad. I try to represent, South Texas. I represent so many cities, so I like to tell everybody, I represent both counties, and I kind of look at everything from a region and just try to deliver for my district.
I was going to say that you're spread out so much over the county areas. It's be very difficult for you to do one side or the other. And
this past legislative session, like people say, to bring home the bacon. I think we did a great job. I got $1.4 million for border libraries, $400,000 allocated to the city of Sullivan, city of Peñita, city of Ed Couch, city of La Feria. I don't even know and I got some money for city of Harlingen, $1 million for Ed Couch for a park grant, $1 million for La Feria for a park grant, $1 million for a special needs park in Harlingen. Those were just, grants given to those areas, and I just tried helping them out and continue to growth. And I tell folks, whenever there's excess money there, I want to make sure that we can address some of those community wants, because it's so difficult now, the way times are. And you mentioned before for cities to go and put in parks and to allocate money for libraries when they have to address all the other resources. So if I can, I want to make sure I take care of those things. I think
we're doing a lot of drainage projects now. Everybody is, but they need maintenance.
Yes.
And so it's one issue to have a bond issue for drainage, but then you've got to better maintain them or they don't function very well.
I'm always trying to advocate for the little things, the things where I can see where when cities address, are we going to address our drainage, utilities, law enforcement, public safety, or are we going to allocate money for this park? The park's a great want, but at the end of the day, you have to address your needs. So that's where I come around, and I try to help out with those type of issues.
Well, I noticed McAllen's name wasn't on that list, so we'll try that next time. I know we haven't asked you. I guess we need to. We'll make sure we ask.
You're doing a phenomenal job. You guys don't need anything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's been difficult.
Yes.
It's. I'd love to have you back. We're almost out of time now.
Okay.
And so, what is the most pressing issue you think at the state right now?
I think a pressing issue is this past legislative session, we tried addressing K through 12 public education and putting more money into that. And of course, everything having to do with the education of a student, from the ground up, teachers, counselors, principals, the administration, everything we could do to make sure we double down on those efforts, because that's super important. I envision a session where we're going to do the same thing, but probably for higher ed. I think we're going to lay the framework to look into higher ed, not only from a collegiate standpoint, but from a vocational, technical, with all these growing fields. We want to make, college more accessible. We want to make it more affordable. We need to make sure that the institutions are going to continue to provide the services they're providing and look at what their future endeavors are. And some institutions are limited on growth. We have the benefit of having, great institution down here, UTRGV, which is growing phenomenally. We put the medical school component there. We're going to make sure that that continues to thrive and whatever needs to get addressed to make sure that becomes a top-tier institution within the state and the nation. And then look at what else we can bring down here to help, educate folks in South Texas. And hopefully we can get folks from outside of South Texas to come and get educated here and then end up living here. So that's kind of what I think will happen. There's been talks that that's something that we're going to probably look at. So hopefully the economy does okay. Hopefully we go into a session where we have the adequate funds and something that we can really look at and address. And I think we'll lay the groundwork. Maybe not this upcoming session to completely, take care of that, but I think it'll lay the groundwork for probably that session or the subsequent session to kind of do a whole revamping of higher ed.
Great. A lot of work.
Yes.
Well, Representative Longoria,
I appreciate it,
thank
Mayor.
you for being on the show, and thank you for all you do for our valley.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And this has been your City of McAllen meeting with the mayor.
Our team. Stories that count from people who care.